Hello and welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. In a recent study conducted by the Claims Conference, a group that provides compensation to Holocaust survivors, there are approximately 245,000 Jewish Holocaust survivors still alive. And it's my honor today to have child Holocaust survivor and educator Dr. Miriam Klein Kassenoff with us. She shares her personal survival story, her impactful work in education, her advocacy, and remembrance. Welcome.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you.
It's really my honor because I have tried so long to get you to come visit me, and here we are today, and it's really my privilege, and I hope I do you justice, your story, and all the work that you do, and thank you for what you do, your tenacity.
You're most welcome, and I thank you for the work that you've been doing with survivors and telling our story and passing on the history, this very important sacred history to the world.
Your life began on the run
Yes.
when you were 4 or 5 years old.
Yes.
In 1941, bring me back to that time.
I love the way you say 4 or 5 because that sort of has become a family discussion with my daughter. She always says, "Mom, why don't you just say you were a year younger?" And I always say, "Well, I'd like to, but the papers and documents don't match." Um, so the reason I don't know if I was 4 or 5 is simply because when my mother grabbed everything when we left, she did not grab my birth certificate. And as we were on the run, every time she was asked, "How old is the little girl?" I think she was just so confused, just trying to escape and hold on to me and the baby that,
That was your brother.
yes, that,
Where were you? What?
well, to go back to the beginning and as quickly as I can tell it in the time allotted. Um, so the Nazis had come into Czechoslovakia in, I believe it was March 39. And I lived in a town called Kosice, Kosice, also known as Kassa,
Mm.
Kassa. And the decision at that time politically by whoever was president or in charge of Kosice was that they were going to hold the Jews for a while. They weren't sure what they were going to do as early as 1940 with the Jews of Kosice. But they did know that they wanted to get all the leading Jewish men in the community in a work labor camp that the Nazis had established. And so they trained young men to be guards. They weren't Nazis, they were Hungarian young men. And my earliest memory was that it was a Shabbat evening, which has always to this day meant so much to me. And we were having a very peaceful, quiet family home. My mother, my father, myself.
So your
And
brother wasn't born yet?
he was not, yes, he was. He had been born. He was just a few months old. And the Nazi police, Hungarian police, broke in and grabbed my father by his elbows and dragged him out. And my mother screamed and she hid me and my baby brother in the closet. And when I came out, I said in Hungarian, that's the language I spoke then, "Where's Daddy?" And she said, "They took him away. They took him away. They took him to a camp." Why? Because we're Jewish. And as I say today to my student audiences and my teacher audiences, because everybody wants to know about anti-Semitism, for me, my story is more about the beginnings and the rise of anti-Semitism for me, because it's been around a long time. But for me, that was my first knowledge that there must be something terrible about being a Jew. I always thought it was a beautiful thing.
But isn't it amazing how it triggers to this day when you say, "I'm Jewish," it triggers a whole response in bringing you back to 1941.
Yeah, well, yesterday or Tuesday, I was doing a professional development for 55 of our public school teachers. And I was to introduce the main speaker, and it was March 4th,
Mm.
2025. And what I said, and it just came out of me, I said, today's March 4th, 2025. Do you know where I was March 4th, 1941?
Mm.
I was interred with my parents in a hotel by the Spanish Nazi guards because we were trying to escape through Spain to Portugal. And in March 4th, 1941, Poland had already been taken over. France had already been taken over, Czechoslovakia, all because of anti-Semitism. And here I am, March 4th, 2025, in front of you, still fighting anti-Semitism.
What were you thinking at that time when you were that young girl? Did you know what was going on? Did you understand? I mean, now as a mature woman, going back, what was
Yeah.
that like looking back at your life all this
Well,
time?
that is such an important question because the first thing that people ask is, come on, you were 4 years old or 5 years old. What do you remember? So I'm very, very honest. I'm very fortunate to be, I think, one of the few child survivors who also went on to become a public school teacher and got my doctorate to study the Holocaust because I'm an English teacher by profession, not a history teacher. And in my research that led me to discover my own past for my doctorate, I went to Yad Vashem. I studied there in Israel, the ghetto fighters' house in Israel. And what I was able to put together were original documents of my family story through the Hayas Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, which is based in New York, and the YIVO research. And what I was able to do was when I got those papers, it was, like a huge pile. And that was 25 years ago. And I was not a scholar. I didn't know what to do with these papers. So I remember spreading them all out in the living room floor and then putting them in chronological order by date and got myself a narrative. So what I was able to do, my parents were living at that time, was I understood the journey, I understood the narrative, but to fill in the holes, I said to my parents at the time, my father was a rabbi in Miami Beach. I said, "This is what I remember. Is this true? And this is what I don't remember. Can you fill that in?"
How
So
fortunate.
so I was lucky enough to have my parents corroborate, yes, yes, we did lose daddy one night on a train. He went on the wrong train. I went on the wrong train, said my mother. And yes, you did hear me screaming, Moritz, Moritz, where are you? Where are you? And yes, you do remember reuniting. And yes, you do remember that we were in a hotel. And yes, you do remember that we finally arrived in Lisbon, Portugal, and I left you to take care of the baby while we went and got papers. So, though, if you ask anyone if they can remember a traumatic event when they were 5 years old, they'll say, yeah, it's a flash of memory. It's there. So, my story, when I tell it, is a combination of my own memory, research, documentation, and what my parents told me.
What is that like to see your life really in front of you on your living room floor, laid out, and you go, ah, and then have your parents fill in those gaps. What is that like? Because here you are, 25 years ago, you said.
Yes.
You didn't have psychiatrists, you didn't have psychologists, you didn't have assistants to help you emotionally work out the trauma.
Well, I did. I did, and I still see a trauma
But
specialist.
after the events of the war, it was just
Oh,
basically,
no,
it
you're
basically,
no, you're right. You're
it was just
absolutely right.
because nowadays, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
after October 7th, which I will get to for the anti-Semitism, because that's very important, but there is boots on the ground for them, and
Yes, yes, yes. You're
but
absolutely right.
but for those that lived afterwards
Yeah.
in the states that you guys came back in,
No.
the women, children, and men,
No,
and loss.
you're absolutely right in that when we did arrive in America, I was finally 6 years old, I think. And I distinctly remember having nightmares, and my parents sent me to a social worker who said, what did she know? I mean, it was 1941. The word of what was happening to the Jews had not gotten out yet. And I remember her trying to understand, why this little girl was having these nightmares. So that's the answer to that question. As far as the papers, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the papers that I found that I now read when I read my script to my story still chokes me up every time I read it. When we had gotten, well, let's go back. When we left Czechoslovakia in December 1940, my father had escaped the camp. He had bribed one of these ignorant young Hungarian Nazi trained boys that all you had to say was, I've got money at home, let me go home and get it.
And bring it back to you.
And they were stupid enough, smart enough, thank God, to say, okay. So my dad came home and said to my mother, we need to leave now. They're going to kill all the Jews of Europe. The word has gotten around the camp. And I'm AWOL. And if they catch me, I'm dead. And my mother had a twin sister, Lily. I believe the picture is here that we can show of my mother's twin sister.
Is that the first slide?
If you want to start the slide. And well, that's my dad, and that's my mom. And that was the baby who grew up to be federal judge Ted Klein in Miami.
He's in the middle on the bottom.
Yes. And that last picture is my mother, who attended all of my Holocaust teacher institutes. And that's the last one. She died at 99. She lived to 99.
God bless her.
Yeah, I hope I do.
And you're like in your 80s.
Yes, definitely.
And staying there. And the power of perseverance.
So I call it the power of perseverance. But then if you'll show the next slide, the woman who runs the International School for Holocaust Studies in Yad Vashem, who's a very good friend of mine, has twin children. And when she heard my story, she was just so touched. She changed it, with my permission, to the fate of two sisters also. So that's my mother and her twin sister. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I still do not know which one is my mother. That is how close. They also were the beauty queens of Munkach, which is where my dad had gone to study for his smichat, for his rabbinate. So my mother said to my father, what are you, crazy? We have this entire Klein family here in Koshitsa. My sister lives in Munkach. I'm not leaving her to go where? Where are we going? And he said, well, what you don't know is that before I got arrested, I got paperwork from your other sister who lives in Chicago and went to the various embassies. And if we can make it to Lisbon, Portugal by March, I have reservations for a ship that will take us to America. And my mother said, you're nuts. He said, well, then I'm going to get caught So she went to my Aunt Lily, and I remember this very well.
And you were this young 4 or 5-year-old little
My
kid.
mother took my hand, and she went to my Aunt Lily, and she said, the story, and you have to come with us. I'm not leaving without you. And Lily said, quote, "You're crazy. What's going to happen to you, to me here, will happen to you on the road. I may as well stay here." And so I always quote Dr. Berenbaum, the scholar, that the optimists stayed and the pessimists left, and the optimists were murdered because we never heard from Lily again.
That's where that quote came from.
Yes, from Michael Berenbaum.
Yeah, I love that quote.
I do too.
Do you remember the whole quote?
Pardon me?
The whole quote.
That's about it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful quote.
Well, it's true. And so we started on the road, the four of us alone, by train. We left December 1940. We went through Hungary, Yugoslavia, Italy, France. When we reached Spain in February, we got arrested. There's a Netflix movie I urge everyone to watch called Transatlantic that really tells this story. Not my story, but the story.
It's a great series.
Well, while that was happening with that group, we were alone. So we got arrested. So
a little baby.
I had an infant brother.
You were all arrested. These young children.
4 of us.
All 4 of you. Yeah. What did they do with you?
Pardon me?
What did they do with you?
They put us in a hotel in Badajoz, Spain called the Nacional. I still have got to go to Spain. So if there's anyone out there that would like to take me back to Spain, because this happened to me once before. I did an interview on my Sunday salon, and I said, gee, I'd like to go back to Portugal. Next thing I know, in 24 hours, I got a call from a lovely Miami woman attorney named Dara Jeffries, and she said, guess what? I'm head of the Jewish community in Lisbon, and I've already booked your flight. I'm taking you back to Lisbon.
Wow, it's so interesting. What was that like to go back in time to a memory that you had that was so important and critical in your life?
I did go back during the COVID.
Right. Oh, COVID. Brave.
And Dara is the head of the Jewish community in Porto. So we went there first, but it was the train from Porto to Lisbon. When I got off that train, I'm sorry I don't have that picture for you here. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is where I arrived. And there's a McDonald's there now. So anyhow, we got arrested. The document I wanted to tell you was that when we were arrested in Spain in the hotel, the situation was that my father had already run out of money by bribery. The only thing left was this necklace. And my mother was not going to give this away to anyone, period. That was it.
Let me see. Let's show the necklace.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, there it is. Tell me this. Oh, it's heavy. It's a beautiful.
It's 100 years old now.
Wow. So tell me what the history and travels of this necklace.
Well, she grabbed it along with a lot of other jewelry and pictures that you can see here now, and she wore it. And she said to my father, I don't care how much money you give in bribery, you are not giving this necklace away. And so it was passed down to me, and I wear it every single day. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And when I wear it, I feel my mother right here. So let me just tell you quickly, because this is really interesting. So we're in this hotel in Spain. We're due in Portugal by March, or we're going to miss the ship. We were told by the Spanish border guards that we had needed 2 weeks' time in the hotel to get our act together, to get the Lisbon Jewish community to help us to get out, or we were going to be sent back to Slovakia. So my father, being a very friendly, outgoing guy, I must add that we had a child born in America, my brother Hank Klein, that everybody knows in Miami. And my father met this non Nazi German tourist who felt so sorry for this little family. He's a righteous Gentile. He said to my father, "Let me help you dictate a letter to the Jewish community in Lisbon about your plight." And I have that letter. I believe it's on the PowerPoint. And it's when I read that letter that I start crying even today, because what my father says to the Jewish community in Lisbon is there it is.
There
Yeah.
it is. Tell me about this letter.
What he says is, "We're locked up in this hotel. I need your help. My children are hungry. My 5-year-old little girl is hungry. I need help." So you can see, as an adult reading this, that my mother and father were so worried about us. And I later found out that my mother wanted to give me away. She wanted to give me and Tibor Ted away. She figured that if she could find a nice family that would take us and protect us, that she was willing to do that.
What an ultimate love that your mother had. That
I was mad at my mother when I found that
But that's
out.
the ultimate sacrifice for your survival.
It is. I was furious with her when.
At that time, you knew about that then?
Well, I found this out 25 years ago.
Oh, so it was on the living room floor.
I remember sitting with her on Lincoln Road, and I said, "How could you have even thought of that?" I said, "Mommy, come on."
And what did she say to you?
She said, "Daddy was afraid." Well, we were talking about the Nicholas Winton story also, where he saved Czechoslovakian children and sent them. And I said, "Well, why didn't you send me there?" And she said, Dad, my father was an Orthodox rabbi. She said, "Daddy was afraid. He didn't know ultimately that you could have been murdered, that if you were sent away, that you would be sent to a non-Jewish family and not be raised Jewish." So,
and a lot of Jewish families did do that.
Yes.
To save their children, they put
in the Nicholas Winton story, they did.
Yep. And
I've met child survivors at Child Survivors Conference that wear a cross and a Jewish star to honor the non-Jewish family that saved them and their Jewish family.
Do they come back?
Did
they come back to their Judaism?
Oh, yeah.
Did you come back to your Judaism?
I never left it.
So in going through what you went through, you didn't go through camps per se, but
No.
you were on the run.
Exactly.
Did that change your perspective of being a Jewish woman?
You know,
and believing in God?
By the time we reached America, I had no idea what happened to me in the past few months. I'm a 6-year-old child who was in the dark, running with parents for 7 months. I had no clue what that was all about. It wasn't until many years later. Sure, I mean, I just went right on with my family. I was messed up. I didn't know what had happened to me. My parents didn't talk about it.
They didn't talk about it.
Well, they talked in the bedroom in Yiddish.
Yeah, that was like the language of code, right?
Right.
You don't want the Kinderlach to know you talk in
yeah,
Yiddish.
The Kinder.
Shh, shh.
So it wasn't until high school, and even then, that would have been 1945 or so, there was nothing about the Holocaust. So it really wasn't until I went to college and started studying to be an English teacher. It really wasn't until I was in my early 20s and I was teaching night that I read on page 23 of Elie Wiesel's book Night, the train stopped in Kassel, picked up all the Jews of Kassel, and went straight on to Auschwitz, where all the Jews of Kassel, 15,000, were immediately gassed. And I went, wait a minute, that's where I was born. So again, I went back to my parents and I said, is this what happened to us? And we ran away from this. And then I started putting the pieces together. No, I'm a very strong
No.
Judaic centric person. I'm not observant or religious anymore as I was growing up, but I'm very Judeo-centric. I'm a Jewish woman and very proud of it.
I God bless you. I know that about you. And what about your parents? And your father was an Orthodox rabbi. He continued.
No, he remained privately Orthodox, observing Shabbat, and so did my mother. But because he didn't have the American smicha, he took whatever positions he could get, and they were
That's being ordained as a rabbi. That's what
right.
you're talking about.
So
Mhm.
ultimately, he was the Orthodox rabbi at Temple Emmanuel. There's a little chapel on Miami Beach at Temple Emmanuel, and that's for the observant Orthodox. As everyone knows, Rabbi Lehrman was the head rabbi of the larger temple. And our family remained Orthodox. That's the only thing I slipped away from
Mm.
was I went to college in Indiana. They did not have kosher food in Bloomington. So I slipped away from that a lot.
And you really made lemonade out of what life gave you, and you really made it your life's mission.
Yeah, I know your time is limited, so I'll just tell you quickly that the way I made it my life's mission was that I was teaching in a very rural high school here in Miami, English. And I had been teaching Julius Caesar. And then I decided, what the heck, I'm going to teach night. Now, remember, this particular school was made up of Haitian, African American, recently Cuban immigration, very few Jewish people. And 4 boys came up to me in the class and said, "Why are you teaching this Jew book? Are you a Jew?" And I got to tell you, I was hot. These were boys that were asking me out to the prom in those days.
How old were you then?
I was only in my mid 30s or late 30s. And I said, "Yeah, I'm Jewish." "Well, we don't want to study this crap."
Mm.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Farah.
Okay.
That particular area had Haitian, African American, migrant workers, very few Jews, and ROTC students.
Mhm.
Who do you think the 4 boys were? From which ethnicity or group?
Don't tell me they were Jewish.
No,
I have no clue.
the ROTC in their uniforms. ROTC, for those who are out there listening, and used to be they used to have a program in the high schools of training young people.
To serve in the military.
Exactly.
Wow.
White boys.
Because they were wearing uniforms? You think that had anything to do with it?
I think they were racist.
Yeah.
One of their mothers was a colleague of mine that also taught English next door. And they harassed me so much. I didn't know where to turn. I was new to Miami. I was not familiar yet with the Jewish Federation, of which I have tremendous support and admiration for now. I didn't want to hurt my father. The union, I was a member of the teachers union, but I didn't know what to do.
Yep.
So I went back and taught Julius Caesar. And that year, there was an article in the teacher union newspaper that the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto Revolt were looking for 30 teachers in America to take to Poland and Israel to learn how to teach the Holocaust through Jewish spiritual resistance. And I went, wow. So there was no fax, there was no computer, there was nothing. I just hand wrote the incident that happened. And the next thing I know, I got a phone call, and the woman sounded like Golda Meir. She said, "Hello." This is Miriam Kassenoff. This is Valatka Mead, the leader of the Warsaw Ghetto resistance. I have chosen you to come to Israel to study how to teach the Holocaust from your letter. Be at LaGuardia Airport on June 19th. And I'm sending you 4 books and I need $1,000.
And that's how this all began. This
Yeah,
whole
and I went
education
to
and
my
advocacy.
dad and I said, Daddy, I don't have $1,000. I was recently divorced. I was just teaching for 10,000 or 13,000 at the schools. And he said, here's the check. Go. Stop asking mommy about her twin sister in the Holocaust. She
And learn.
cries. Come back and learn who you are.
Wow.
And I went for 4 weeks with 29 other teachers. We are now over 5,000 of us, one of me in every city, trained on how to teach the Holocaust.
And you do this through the University of Miami
I
Education.
started out doing it with the public schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then the University of Miami contacted me 22 years ago and said, would you do it for us? And then at the time the memorial was being built and the founders asked me to be transferred from that rural school to Miami Beach High to help develop the programs at the memorial, which I still do.
Boundless energy. We have time for one more question.
Okay.
October 7th.
Yeah.
Rise of anti-Semitism, climatic moment in history. How do you as a Holocaust survivor look at the history of where you've been, where you lived through, and see it now in the eyes of October 7th, Israel, America, anti-Semitism? What does that do to you, and what are some of the feelings, thoughts moving forward for our future generations?
Okay, so I'm going to make this a very brief answer because I find it so complex. About 10 days ago, your audience can Google this. CBS did a Sunday morning Jane Pauley show
Which was
on
fabulous.
local survivors. I was in it. And Lee Cowan, the anchor, asked me that question. He said to me and David Schachter and Judy Rodan, the other 2 survivors from Miami, the same question. And my answer,
I'm in good company then.
my answer was, I remember seeing that girl, an awful sight of that woman they were dragging, and it was clear that I think she had been raped.
This is October 7th now.
Yeah.
We're talking Israel, Gaza.
And I said, oh my God, they're killing the Jews again.
Mm.
And that's the only clip they showed on CBS. That's how I felt that day. I thought, I can't believe this. In Israel, the home that we thought we were safe in. And I just couldn't believe it. You know, I've always felt that I might end my years in Israel. I've been to Israel 35 times. I love it there. I need to go again as soon as I can. I've always liked the way Israel has treated their senior citizens. They have tremendous regard for them. And I sort of felt like I knew that my parents would want me to maybe end my life there too. And so my heart was broken. And how do I feel about, so I'm kind of different from, I think, a lot of people, I don't know. With everything that's gone on in the world, with me, with my family, with my fellow survivors, with the Holocaust, with October 7th, I'm an Anne Frank girl.
Tell me what that means.
I feel that people are really basically good at heart. I really do.
Even after all that you've been through and seen.
Yeah, but look at all the good.
Mm-hmm.
Look what happened to my father. He became a rabbi. My mother became a beloved woman on Lincoln Road. All the waiters and waitresses loved this woman. She wore these cat eye glasses, and they'd say something, and she'd say, "Here, darling, you want it? You can have it." Look at what happened to me. I got my doctorate. Look at what happened to Ted. He became a federal judge. Look what happened to Hank, my youngest brother. He's a respected businessman. Look what happened to the survivors. Every survivor you're interviewing, I know it, has made something beautiful of his life. Look at the education we're sharing. Look at what's happening in the world. Look at the kids that are studying and learning. And there are interruptions like the Holocaust, like October 7th, but we go on. And you want to know something? I don't care what politics are going on in the world. Israel will always survive. Israel has always survived through everything. It will always survive. And yes, there are evil people in the world, but somehow in the end, I don't know what it is that I feel that people, if we have a moment, I'll tell you why I do think people are basically good. As I've grown older, which has been a very difficult transition for me, because I've always thought I was going to be a young chick, but I find that wherever I go, people are so kind. They'll help me walk. They'll help me get into. A man had to literally pick me up on his shoulders yesterday to get me out of the Uber on the curb because I couldn't step up on the curb to go to a doctor's office. I mean, what is this? A stranger. People are good. We just need to find the good.
Dr. Miriam Klein Kassenoff, it's been my pleasure, and may you continue with much strength in your mission, in your education, and in your heart.
And live as long as my mother.
At least 120.
Bis 120.
Thank you so much. I'm Fara Sax. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.